The office was a tomb of glass and silence. Nia's heart hammered against her ribs as she clutched her phone, her thumb hovering over a terrifying text from Marcus. Suddenly, the air in the room vanished. Tae-ho stood behind her, his presence a suffocating weight. "Who are you smiling for, Nia?" "It's private, sir," she whispered, her voice trembling. In one blurred motion, he slammed his hand onto her desk and hauled her up by her blazer. His eyes were dark, fueled by a possessive jealousy the audience has seen brewing for months. He thinks he's catching a cheater. He thinks he's reclaiming what's his. "I don't pay you to daydream about other men," he growled, his grip tightening as he jerked her forward. But as his hand caught the edge of her sleeve and pulled, the fabric gave way. The harsh LED lights hit the jagged silver scars across her collarbone and ribs, marks of a systematic cruelty he never imagined. Tae-ho's hand didn't just let go, it went dead. The rage in his eyes flickered out, replaced by a haunting, hollow realization. The man he was jealous of wasn't a lover, he was a monster. "Who?" he whispered, his voice cracking for the first time. "Nia, who did this to you?" He saw the scars, and in that second, the man she feared became the only thing standing between her and a monster. But before we descend into the darkness of how they got here, I have to ask you, have you ever had to hide your pain just to survive the day? Drop your answer in the comments section. We're building a sanctuary here for the resilient, the survivors, and those who believe that even the darkest protectors can provide the brightest light. If you believe Nia deserves justice, hit that subscribe button and join the inner circle. Let's go back to the beginning, to the day the devil of Seoul first set his sights on the woman who would change everything. The morning ritual always started with a lie. Nia stood before the bathroom mirror, the fluorescent light humming a low, mocking tune against the silence of her cramped apartment. In her hand, a tube of high-coverage concealer felt like a weapon. She dabbed the thick, beige cream onto the jagged yellow and purple map of yesterday's mistakes. Marcus had been particularly loving last night. He said he hit her because she looked at him with too much exhaustion, as if her 14-hour workday was an insult to his ego. She blended the cream with a damp sponge, watching the evidence of his rage vanish beneath a flawless, artificial glow. To the world, she was Nia, the elite secretary to the most powerful man in Seoul. To herself, she was a ghost haunting a body that didn't feel like hers anymore. She adjusted her high-neck silk blouse, checking every angle. Not a single slip of skin could be visible. In Tae-ho Kwon's world, a single wrinkle was a failure. A bruise? That was an invitation for a conversation she wasn't ready to have. Across town, in a suite that hovered, above the clouds, Tae-ho Kwon wasn't sleeping. He never did. He sat in a dark room illuminated only by a wall of high-definition security monitors. His eyes were fixed on one screen, the lobby of Kwon Industries. He watched the timestamp. 6:58 a.m. Right on time, the glass doors swirled, and Nia stepped through. Tae-ho leaned forward, his thumb tracing the line of his jaw. He watched her through the lens of a $50,000 camera system, zooming in until he could see the slight tremor in her hand as she swiped her keycard. He watched the way her chest rose and fell beneath her coat. He was obsessed with the rhythm of her life, the way she tilted her head when she was nervous, the way she never looked the security guards in the eye. "Who were you with last night, Nia?" His mind hissed, the thoughts unspooling like dark silk. "Why do you look like you haven't slept? Why does your smile look like it was painted on by a funeral director?" He felt a familiar, ugly heat rise in his throat. Jealousy. It was a poison he drank willingly every morning. He imagined a man, some faceless, nameless shadow, holding her, touching the skin he was only allowed to see from a distance. The thought made him want to shatter the screen. He didn't want her to have a life outside these walls. He wanted her to be a statue in his garden, a secret he could keep locked away in his glass tower. The elevator chimed on the 50th floor. Nia stepped out, her heels clicking against the marble with the precision of a metronome. She felt the weight of the building pressing down on her, but it was nothing compared to the weight of the gaze she knew was waiting. She walked into the executive suite. The air was cold, smelling of expensive cedar and filtered oxygen. Tae-ho was already at his desk, his silhouette framed by the panoramic view of the city. He didn't look up as she entered. He didn't have to. He could hear her heartbeat from across the room. "You're 30 seconds later, then." "Yesterday, Nia," he said, his voice a low, dangerous velvet. Nia froze, her fingers tightening on her briefcase. "I apologize, Mr. Kwon. There was a delay on the line 2 subway. Subways are for people who have nowhere important to be." He finally looked up, his dark eyes cutting through her like a scalpel. He didn't see a secretary. He saw a mystery he couldn't solve. He saw the way she stood, stiff, guarded, her arms folded over her stomach as if protecting a wound. His jealousy flared. He assumed she had stayed up late with him. He assumed the glow of her skin was from another man's touch, not a $40 tube of makeup. "The coffee," he snapped, his tone turning clinical and cruel. "Black, no sugar, and make it yourself. The kitchen staff doesn't know how to handle the beans I like." "Yes, sir." "And Nia?" She stopped at the door, her back to him. "That blouse. It's too high. It looks suffocating." Nia felt a cold sweat break out under her arms. "It's the style, Mr. Kwon." "It's an eyesore," he lied, his eyes narrowing. He wanted to see her neck. He wanted to see the pulse he knew was racing. He wanted to strip away the layers until he found the truth she was hiding from him. "Change it by lunch. Or better yet, don't. You'll be too busy to worry about fashion today. I've added the quarterly tax audits for the Singapore branch to your pile. I want them finished by 9 p.m. 9 p.m.? Sir, I have a commitment tonight." Tae-ho stood up, his tall, broad frame casting a long shadow over her desk. He walked toward her, his presence a suffocating force. He stopped just inches away, close enough to see the micro flinch in her eyes. "Your commitment is to me, Nia," he whispered, his breath ghosting over her ear. "Everything else in your life is a distraction I don't intend to tolerate. Now go. My coffee is getting cold and my patience is shorter than your excuses." Nia bowed her head, the heavy silk of her collar rubbing against the tender skin of her throat. She walked toward the kitchen, her mind a frantic blur. She was trapped. Trapped by a man who treated her like a slave because he was too proud to admit he was her captive, and trapped by a man at home who treated her like a punching bag because he knew she had nowhere else to go. She began to grind the coffee beans, the sound drowning out the soft sob she refused to let escape. Behind the glass wall, Tae-ho sat back down, his eyes returning to the monitor. He watched her every move, his jaw tight. He would keep her here all night. He would drown her in work until she was too exhausted to think of anyone else. If he couldn't have her heart, he would have her time, every second of it. The morning didn't just crawl, it bled. Nia sat at her desk, the blue light of the monitor reflecting in eyes that felt like they were filled with sand. Every few minutes, the surface of her mahogany desk would hum, a low, rhythmic vibration that made her stomach drop. "Haven't you checked in? Who is looking at haven't you checked in? Who is looking at you?" Through the glass wall of the executive suite, Tae-ho watched. He wasn't looking at the markets. He wasn't looking at the merger. He was focused entirely on that silver device sitting next to Nia's hand. To him, that phone wasn't a piece of technology. It was a rival. It was a doorway into a room where he wasn't invited. He watched her thumb hover near the screen. He saw the way she bit her lip, a habit she only had when she was thinking of something or someone else. The jealousy hit him like a physical blow to the solar plexus. It was ugly. It was irrational. It made his blood feel like liquid lead. He imagined Nia smiling at a screen, sending soft words to a man who didn't deserve her. He imagined her laughing at a joke he didn't tell. The thought of her belonging to another man, even in her mind, was an insult to his existence. "Nia, In here." His voice over the intercom was a jagged blade. She startled, her phone nearly sliding off the desk. She gathered her tablet and walked in, her steps heavy. She didn't look at him. She never did anymore. "Is there a problem with the connection in the lobby?" Tae-ho asked. He was leaning back, his hands folded under his chin, his dark eyes narrowed into slits. "No, sir. Everything is fine." "Then why?" He stepped around his desk, his movements slow. "Is your device more active than my trading floor? Is the outside world so much more interesting than the work I pay you for?" Nia swallowed hard. She could feel the heat of him. It's just a family matter, Mr. Kwon." Family. He spat the word like it was bitter. He didn't believe her. He saw the way she guarded that phone like a treasure. "I don't pay for family matters. I pay for focus. I pay for your eyes to be on my business, not a screen." He walked to the corner of his office and picked up a massive leather-bound binder. It hit his desk with a thud that echoed like a casket closing. "The 5-year historical audit for the logistics division," he said, his voice dropping to a low, cold whisper. "I want a manual cross-reference of every line item against the digital ledger. No software, just your eyes and your pen." Nia stared at the 500 pages. Her vision blurred. "Sir, this will take all night. I was hoping to leave by 7. "Then you'd better start now." He stepped closer, invading her space until she was forced to look up. He saw the fear in her eyes and mistook it for defiance. He mistook her exhaustion for the remnants of a long night spent in another man's arms. "And Nia, if I see that phone light up one more time, I'll have it crushed. Do I make myself clear?" "Yes, sir," she whispered. "Good. Get to work. I want you at that desk until the last page is signed. If you have time to text, you have time to work." He watched her retreat, her shoulders shaking. He sat back down, a sick sense of satisfaction settling in his gut. He had done it. He had chained her to him for another 12 hours. He had ensured that whatever Marcus or any other man wanted, they would have to wait. He didn't care if she hated him for it. As long as she was under his roof, under his shadow, and away from him, Tae-ho could breathe. He opened his own laptop, but he didn't work. He just watched the camera feed of her desk, waiting for the phone to buzz again, just so he'd have an excuse to stay angry. He was the king of an empire. But in that moment, he was just a man obsessed with a phone he couldn't control. The rain began to smear the Seoul skyline by 4 p.m., turning the world outside the glass into a gray, blurred mess. Inside the 50th floor, the atmosphere was even heavier. The internal line on Tae-ho's desk rang once. It was June, his head of security. "Sir?" June's voice was professional, but there was a strain in it. "The black SUV is back. It's been idling at the curb for 40 minutes. The driver isn't moving. He's just staring at the lobby doors." Tae-ho leaned back in his chair, his eyes cutting to the glass wall where Nia sat. She looked smaller today, fragile, like a piece of porcelain that had been dropped and glued back together too many times. "Is he armed?" Tae-ho asked, his voice a low vibration. "We can't tell, but he's a lowlife, sir, dressed like a street thug. Doesn't look like he belongs anywhere near this district." Tae-ho's jaw tightened until it ached. A street thug. He looked at Nia, at her elegance, her sharp mind, her expensive silk, and the thought of her belonging to a man like that made his blood boil. He didn't see an abuser. He saw a lovesick woman who was wasting her life on a man beneath her. "Keep a guard on the elevators," Tae-ho commanded. "Don't. Let that trash in. If he moves toward the doors, handle it." He hung up and stood, his movements stiff. He walked out of his office, his presence a dark cloud that sucked the air out of the room. He stopped right at Nia's desk. She didn't look up, her pen flying across the audit pages, but he saw the way her hand spasmed. "You look like hell, Nia," he snapped. The words were a shield for the pity he felt. He hated that she looked exhausted. He hated the dark circles under her eyes that even her heavy makeup couldn't fully hide. Nia finally looked up. Her eyes were glazed with fatigue. "I'm sorry, Mr. Kwon. I stayed up late, finishing the reports." Liar. He leaned over her desk, his shadow swallowing her whole. "You stayed up late for him. That ghost in the lobby, the one in the black SUV, is that the best you can do?" Nia's face went paper white. Her pen rolled off the desk and hit the floor. He's here? Tae-ho saw the terror in her eyes, but his own ego twisted it. He thought she was scared he was going to fire her for her boyfriend's behavior. He thought she was ashamed of her low-life lover. "He's at my curb, acting like a dog waiting for a bone." Tae-ho hissed, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "It's pathetic. You work for the Kwon family. You sit at the right hand of power. And yet you go home to a man who can't even afford a decent suit? Who makes you look like a victim of sleep deprivation." "Sir, please." "Fix yourself," he interrupted, his eyes burning with a jealous fever. "Go to the restroom, wash your face. If I have to look at those hollow eyes for one more hour, I'll have my security throw your friend into the Han River. You are a reflection of me, Nia, and right now, you look like trash." He turned on his heel and walked back into his office, slamming the glass door behind him. He sat in the dark, his heart hammering against his ribs. He felt a twisted sense of superiority. He was the one with the empire. He was the one keeping her safe in this tower. He told himself he was protecting the company's image. But as he watched her through the glass, scurrying toward the restroom with her head down, he knew the truth. He wanted her to see that Marcus was a peasant and he was a king. He didn't realize the hollow eyes weren't from a lack of sleep. They were from a lack of hope. And the ghost in the lobby wasn't waiting to take her home. He was waiting to remind her that she never truly left his cage. Midnight had come and gone, leaving the 50th floor feeling like an island of cold light in a sea of darkness. Nia's fingers felt like lead as they moved over the keyboard. Every muscle in her neck was screaming, a dull, throbbing ache that radiated from the spot where Marcus had gripped her too hard 48 hours ago. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. Inside the executive office, Tae-ho sat in the shadows. The only light in the room came from the amber glow of a half-empty glass of whiskey on his desk. He wasn't looking at the merger documents. He was watching Nia through the glass wall. He told himself this was necessary. A high-stakes acquisition required perfection. But the truth was uglier. He knew that the moment Nia walked out those doors, she was gone. She belonged to the man in the black SUV. She belonged to a life that didn't involve him. The thought of her lying in another man's bed, her dark hair fanned out on a pillow he didn't own, made the whiskey taste like ash. "Nia," his voice rasped over the intercom, thick with the alcohol and a possessive hunger he couldn't kill. She flinched, a quick, sharp jerk of her shoulders that made his jaw tighten. She walked into his office, the fluorescent light from the hallway spilling in behind her, outlining her silhouette. "The projections for the third quarter," he said, his voice low. "They're inconsistent. Redo them. All of them." Nia leaned against the doorframe, her eyes closing for a fraction of a second. "Sir, it's 2 a.m. I've been here since 7. I can't see the numbers anymore." "Then open your eyes wider," he snapped, the cruelty returning to mask the urge to walk over and pull her into his lap. He wanted to feel the weight of her. He wanted to prove to himself that she was real and not just a ghost he was chasing. "You stay until the work is done. If you're too tired to handle a simple projection, perhaps you aren't as elite as I thought." He saw her throat move as she swallowed a sob. He expected her to argue. He expected her to beg to go home to her lover. Instead, she simply nodded. "Yes, Mr. Kwon. I'll stay." Tae-ho watched her retreat to her desk. He didn't see the relief that flooded her chest. He didn't know that every minute she spent in this cold glass tower was a minute she didn't have to spend in a dark apartment, listening for the sound of a key in the lock. To Nia, this office was a sanctuary. To her, Tae-ho's tyranny was a mercy. He watched her through the glass, his hand tightening around his glass until the knuckles went white. He was fighting a war inside himself. He wanted to go out there. He wanted to slide his hand under her chin and force her to look at him. He wanted to ask her why she was so loyal to a man who made her look so broken. But he didn't move. He just sat in the dark, drinking and watching. He was the king of the Kwon Empire, and he was keeping his favorite subject in a cage of his own making. He told himself he was a tyrant. Nia told herself she was safe. And as the clock ticked toward 3 a.m., the only thing they shared was a silence that was rapidly becoming a lie. By 4 a.m., the air in the office had grown thin and stale. The city below was a graveyard of lights, and the silence between the glass walls felt like a loaded gun. Tae-ho stood in the doorway of his office, his jacket discarded, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that looked like they were carved from granite. He watched Nia. She was hunched over a stack of physical files, her movements slow, almost rhythmic, as she sorted through years of data. In his hand, he held a single sheet of paper, the final signature page she needed to complete the set. He walked toward her, his footsteps silent on the thick carpet. He didn't say a word. He just wanted to be near her. He wanted to break the glass wall that had been between them all night. As he reached her desk, he leaned down, extending his arm to hand her the file. His hand passed close to her shoulder, a simple, professional movement. Nia didn't see him coming. She only felt the sudden shift in the air, the shadow looming over her, and the flash of a hand in her peripheral vision. She didn't just move, she recoiled. Nia let out a sharp, strangled gasp, her entire body jerking away from him so violently that her chair skidded across the marble floor. She threw her arms up in front of her face, her eyes wide and glassy with a primal, instinctive terror. For a heartbeat, she wasn't in a multi-billion-dollar office. She was back in her kitchen, waiting for the weight of a fist. Tae-ho froze. His hand stayed suspended in mid-air, the paper trembling slightly. The silence that followed was deafening. Nia lowered her arms slowly, her face going from pale to a ghostly, translucent white. Her breath came in shallow, jagged hitches. I'm sorry, Mr. Kwon, she whispered, her voice shaking so hard the words barely formed. You startled me. Tae-ho didn't move. He didn't help her steady her chair. He felt a surge of something cold and acidic wash through his veins. He didn't see her trauma. He didn't see the reflex of a woman who had been hit too many times. His ego, already raw from a night of drinking and jealousy, translated her terror into a different kind of pain. He thought she found him repulsive. He thought the very idea of his hand near her. Skin was so disgusting to her that she couldn't help but jump back in horror. Is his touch that much better? Tae-ho thought, his eyes turning into shards of black ice. Do you flinch when he touches you, Nia? Or do you lean into him while you push me away? The rejection sliced through his pride, leaving a jagged wound. He pulled his hand back as if he had been burned, his face hardening into a mask of pure, unadulterated cruelty. Don't flatter yourself, he hissed, his voice a low, lethal rasp. I have no interest in touching you. I was giving you the file you failed to include. He dropped the paper onto her desk. It fluttered down like a dead bird. I didn't mean to... Quiet. The word was a whip crack. He stepped back, putting a deliberate, cold distance between them. Your theatrics are exhausting. It's clear your mind is occupied by whatever trash you've left waiting for you at home. If you're so repulsed by my presence, then perhaps you should focus on the paper in front of you instead of the man standing over you. Sir, please, it wasn't that... I said quiet. He loomed over her one last time, his gaze dripping with a new kind of venom. Since you have enough energy to jump out of your skin, you have enough energy to stay another 2 hours. I want the digital backups encrypted and verified before you leave. If I see you flinch again, I'll assume you're unfit for this position. He turned on his heel and slammed his office door so hard the glass vibrated. He sat at his desk, his hands shaking with a rage he couldn't name. He hated her in that moment. He hated that she could make him feel like a monster just by breathing. He decided right then that he would never be gentle again. If she wanted a monster, he would give her one. He would keep her trapped in this office, drowned in work, until she forgot what any other man's touch felt like. Nia sat at her desk, her hands pressed against her ribs to stop the shaking. She had seen the look in his eyes, the hatred. She didn't know how to tell him that she wasn't repulsed. She didn't know how to tell him that his shadow was the only thing that made her feel safe, even when it felt like a cage. She picked up her pen, her vision blurring with tears. She refused to shed. The sun was beginning to rise over Seoul, but for Nia, the world had never been darker. By the third day of the merger negotiations, the 50th floor felt less like a corporate headquarters and more like a high-security bunker. Tae-ho sat behind his desk, his eyes fixed on a grainier-than-usual feed from the parking garage. The black SUV was there again, tucked into the shadows of a concrete pillar. It didn't move. It didn't park. It just waited. His mind, sharpened by years of corporate warfare, immediately went to the most logical conclusion: industrial espionage. The Choi family, his main rivals, were known for using low-level thugs to track the movements of executive staff. They were looking for a leak, a weak point. And in Tae-ho's mind, Nia, distracted, fragile, and constantly on her phone, was the perfect target. "June," Tae-ho barked into his secure line. "Double the guard detail on the executive floor. I want 2 men at the elevators and 1 in the stairwell. If anyone without a level 5 clearance so much as looks at the 50th floor, I want them detained." He watched the guards move into position on the monitors. He told himself he was protecting the company's data. But as his gaze drifted to Nia, sitting at her desk with her head in her hands, he knew the truth. He was building a fortress, and she was the only prize inside. Nia felt the shift immediately. The presence of the suits with earpieces stationed 10 feet from her desk made her skin crawl. Every time she looked up, she met the cold, unblinking eyes of a professional killer. She felt the walls closing in. At home, Marcus was a shadow in the alleyway, a bruise waiting to happen. At work, Tae-ho was a tyrant who had turned her office into a prison. There was no air left to breathe. At 3 p.m., she walked into Tae-ho's office to deliver the encrypted backups. Her hands were shaking so violently the tablet nearly slipped from her grip. "Sir," she whispered, her voice sounding like it was coming from a long way off. "The guards. It's too much. I can't work like this." Tae-ho didn't look up from his papers. "The guards are there because you've made yourself a target, Nia. Your friend in the SUV is a security risk. If you can't handle the oversight, perhaps you should have been more careful about who you let into your life." Nia felt something snap inside her. The fear, the exhaustion, the weight of the secret she was carrying, it all rushed to her throat. She stepped closer to his desk, her eyes wide and desperate. "Mr. Kwon, please, you don't understand. It's not about the company. He's not a spy. I don't care what he is." Tae-ho roared, slamming his palms onto the desk as he stood. He loomed over her, his face a mask of disgusted jealousy. He thought she was about to confess her love for the man. He thought she was going to beg for him to let her boyfriend go. "I don't care about your sordid little love story, Nia. I don't have time for your personal drama or the pathetic choices you make in the dark." "It's not drama, sir. I'm trying to tell you." "Save it." He stepped around the desk, his voice dropping to a low, lethal hiss. "I pay you to be a professional, not a character in a melodrama. If your personal life is so chaotic that it requires me to increase my security budget, then you are a liability. Don't speak to me about him again. I don't want to hear his name. I don't want to hear your excuses." He leaned in, his eyes burning into hers. "You're here to work. If you want a shoulder to cry on, find it somewhere else. But while you're under my roof, you will be silent. Do you understand?" Nia stared at him, the confession dying in her throat like a strangled bird. She saw the coldness in his eyes, the absolute refusal to see her as anything other than a flawed tool. "Yes, Mr. Kwon," she said, her voice dead. "Get out and tell the guards to bring me the lobby logs. I want to see exactly how many times your drama has circled my building today." Nia walked out, the heavy glass door clicking shut behind her with the finality of a cell door. She sat at her desk and looked at her phone. A new message from Marcus. "I see the guards, Nia. They can't stay with you forever. I'll see you at home." She closed her eyes, a single tear tracing a path through her concealer. She was alone. Tae-ho was protecting his empire, and Marcus was protecting his property. And Nia was just the ground they were fighting over. The safety of the 50th floor was an illusion. Nia realized this when her phone vibrated at noon, then again at 12:05 and 12:10. She didn't need to unlock the screen. The notifications displayed the horror in snippets. They weren't texts anymore. They were visual receipts of her surveillance. A graining photo of her back as she entered the lobby that morning. A shot of her silhouette through the glass of the break room window. Marcus was showing her that no matter how many guards Tae-ho stationed at the elevators, he was still the one holding the leash. "Look at you," the caption read. "Looking like a queen in your high tower. Don't forget who owns the tower, Nia. Don't forget who makes you bleed." Nia's hands shook so violently she dropped her pen for the third time that hour. Her spreadsheets were a mess of transposed numbers and broken formulas. Every time a shadow moved in the hallway, she gasped. Every time a door opened, she flinched. Inside the glass office, Tae-ho was reaching his breaking point. He watched her through the monitor, his heart twisting with a toxic mixture of rage and obsession. He saw her staring. At the phone, her face pale and her eyes red-rimmed. He didn't see a woman being terrorized. He saw a woman pining. He saw a woman so distracted by her low-life lover that she was letting his empire slip through her fingers. The jealousy wasn't just a spark anymore. It was a forest fire, consuming his logic. He was convinced she was lovesick, addicted to the drama of a man who didn't deserve her. "Nia!" He didn't use the intercom. He threw open the door, the sound of the wood hitting the stopper like a thunderclap. She jumped, nearly falling out of her chair, her hand instinctively covering her phone. "Is the conversation that captivating?" Tae-ho hissed, walking toward her with a predatory grace. "Is your secret lover so important that you've forgotten how to do basic math? Your last 3 reports are garbage, incoherent, sloppy, and beneath the standards of this office." I'm sorry, sir. I'm just having a hard time focusing," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Clearly. He leaned over her desk, his expensive cedar and ash scent invading her space. He saw the phone under her hand. He wanted to snatch it and crush it beneath his heel. "You're addicted to him, aren't you? This little high school romance. This Marcus has you so wrapped around his finger that you can't even function." "It's not like that, Mr. Kwon." "I don't care what it's like," he roared. He slammed his hand onto her desk, inches from hers. "I am done watching you waste my time on a man who belongs in the gutter. Since you can't focus in the city, we're changing the scenery." Nia looked up, her eyes wide. "What?" "I'm moving the merger finalization to my private estate in Gapyeong. This weekend," he commanded, his eyes burning into hers. "You will be there. No subways, no black SUVs at the curb, no distractions. You will stay in the guest wing, and you will work until this addiction is purged from your system." "Sir, I can't stay at your house. That is a direct order." Tae-ho leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a low, possessive rasp. I am breaking this cycle, Nia. If you can't find the strength to leave him, I will provide the cage. You belong to Kwon Global. You belong to this merger. And for the next 48 hours, you will belong to me." He didn't wait for her to respond. He turned on his heel and walked away, leaving her in the ruins of her composure. Nia stared at the photo on her phone, Marcus standing right outside the parking garage entrance, smiling. Tae-ho thought he was breaking an addiction. He thought he was winning a war for her attention. He didn't realize that by taking her to his estate, he was removing her from the only place the guards could see her. He thought he was providing a sanctuary. Nia knew he was just moving the battlefield. The drive to the Gapyeong estate was a 2-hour descent into a different kind of darkness. Tae-ho sat in the back of the armored sedan, his eyes fixed on the tablet in his lap, while Nia sat as far from him as the leather bench would allow. She stared out at the passing trees, her reflection in the window looking like a woman already drowned. Tae-ho wasn't looking at spreadsheets. He was looking at intel. A file had landed on his desk an hour before they left. The Choi family, the rivals who had been bleeding his shipping lanes for months, were mobilizing. His informant suggested the Chois were looking for a soft entry into Kwon Global. They needed a back door, a way into his encrypted servers, and they were using low-level street rats to find it. Tae-ho's gaze shifted to Nia. His jaw tightened. Is that what Marcus is? The thought burned in his mind. Not a lover, a handler. The jealousy that had been eating him alive transformed into something much more dangerous. Professional suspicion. If Marcus was a Choi plant, then Nia wasn't just a distracted secretary. She was a traitor. Every late night, he'd kept her at the office, every file he'd handed her, every secret he'd whispered in her presence. She could be feeding it all to the enemy. "Nia," he said, his voice cold enough to frost the glass. She jumped, her hand flying to her throat. "Yes, sir?" "How long have you known him?" "Marcus." Nia's heart skipped. The mention of his name in Tae-ho's mouth felt like a death sentence. A year. Maybe a little more. "And what does he do? For a living?" I don't really know. He moves around a lot. Odd jobs." Tae-ho let out a short, harsh laugh that held no humor. Odd jobs? Like loitering around corporate headquarters? Like tracking the movements of a billionaire's staff? He turned to her, his dark eyes searchlights in the dim interior of the car. "The Choi family pays well for odd jobs, Nia. Is that where your loyalty lies? Are you smiling at that phone because every text is a payday from my enemies?" Nia stared at him, her mouth falling open. The absurdity of it would have been funny if it wasn't so terrifying. Tae-ho thought she was a high-level spy. He thought her bruises and her fear were part of a grander conspiracy. He was so caught up in his world of shadows and power plays that he couldn't see the simple, brutal reality of a man who just liked to hurt women. "It's not like that," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I would never betray you. I have nothing to do with the Chois." "Then why are you so afraid?" Tae-ho leaned in, his shadow pinning her against the door. "Is it guilt? Or is it the fear that I'll find out exactly what you've been doing in the dark?" "I'm afraid because you're scaring me," she cried out, the truth finally slipping through the cracks. Tae-ho froze. For a second, his Mafia boss exterior wavered. He saw the genuine terror in her eyes, but his mind, poisoned by years of betrayal, twisted it again. He saw a spy who had been caught. He saw a woman who was playing on his emotions to stay alive. "We'll see," he rasped, pulling back. "We're going to my estate. It's isolated. No signals go out that I don't monitor. If you're a spy, Nia, you've just walked into the last cage you'll ever see. If you're a traitor, I'll find out by morning. And God help you if you've been lying to me." He turned away, his heart a cold stone in his chest. He told himself he was doing his duty to his family. He told himself he was protecting his empire. But as he watched Nia curl into a ball against the car door, weeping silently, a small, quiet part of him wanted to be wrong. He wanted her to be innocent. He wanted her to be his. But in the world of the Kwon family, innocence was a luxury he couldn't afford. And if Nia was the enemy, he would have to destroy the only thing he had ever truly wanted. The estate in Gapyeong was a masterpiece of stone and silence, tucked deep into the mountains where the air was too thin for secrets. By midnight, the grand house felt like a mausoleum. Nia stood in the auxiliary break room, her hands trembling as she tried to pour water into a glass. The crystal rattled against the pitcher, a frantic glass-on-glass chatter that echoed her internal state. Her phone sat on the marble counter, its screen glowing like a radioactive coal. The message from Marcus had come 5 minutes ago. "The Choi boys gave me a ride, Nia. Your boss thinks he's hidden you, but I'm standing at the north gate. If you aren't at the service entrance in 10 minutes, I'm showing him everything. I'll tell him you're my little canary, singing all his secrets to me. Imagine what a man like Tae-ho does to a traitor." Nia's breath came in ragged, shallow hitches. She wasn't just trapped. She was being framed. Marcus was using Tae-ho's own paranoia to destroy her. If she stayed, Tae-ho would eventually believe she was a spy. If she went to Marcus, he would break her bones for making him wait. There was no exit. She leaned against the counter, and finally the dam broke. She didn't sob, she leaked. Silent, hot tears tracked through her foundation, carving lines in the perfect mask she had worn all day. "The water is overflowing, Nia," she gasped, the glass slipping from her hand and shattering in the sink. Tae-ho was leaning against the doorframe, his silk shirt unbuttoned at the collar, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He looked like a dark god of judgment. He had been watching her from the doorway for 2 minutes. He had seen the way she clutched that phone. He had seen the way her shoulders shook. His heart was a chaotic mess of lethal jealousy and agonizing concern. He wanted to cross the room. He wanted to pull her head onto his shoulder and tell her that no Choi, no Marcus, and no ghost could touch her while he drew breath. But the Mafia boss in him, the man who had been betrayed by everyone he ever trusted, won the battle. He convinced himself the tears were a performance. He convinced himself she was crying because she was caught between him and her handler. "Sir, I'm sorry," she choked out, frantically wiping at her eyes, only to smear the makeup further, revealing the edge of a bruise Marcus had left on her jaw. Tae-ho saw the mark. His grip on his glass tightened until his knuckles turned white. His soul screamed to ask who did it, but his mouth spoke a different language. "Stop the theatrics, Nia," he hissed, his voice like grinding stones. "The crying, the shaking. It's beneath you. You've been distracted since we arrived. If you're so distressed by being away from your plans, then finish the filing so we can return to the city. I don't have time for a secretary who acts like a tragic lead in an opera." Nia looked at him, her eyes wide and shattered. "You think I'm acting? You think I want to be like this?" "I think you're a liability," he snapped, stepping closer, his scent of cedar and cold anger washing over her. "I think you're playing a dangerous game with the Choi family, and you're using your tears to keep me from seeing the truth. Finish the reports by 3 a.m. If they aren't on my desk, don't bother showing up in the morning." He turned on his heel, his heart breaking with every step he took away from her. He went back to his study and slammed the door, leaning his head against the wood. He hated himself. He hated her. He hated the world that made them enemies. Nia stood in the kitchen, surrounded by broken glass and a ticking clock. This was it, the absolute bottom. The man she secretly admired, the man who represented the only safety she had ever known, saw her as a traitor. She looked at the phone. Marcus was waiting. Tae-ho was judging, and Nia was finally, truly, alone. She picked up a shard of glass, her fingers bleeding, and began to clean the mess, her mind already numb to the pain. The sun rose over the Gapyeong Mountains like a cold, bleeding wound. By 8 a.m., the estate was bathed in a pale, unforgiving light that offered no warmth to the woman standing in the foyer. Nia had reached the end of her rope. She hadn't slept. She had spent the night alternating between the audit and the silent, rhythmic terror of watching the north gate from her window. Marcus hadn't come inside, but his presence was a heavy, suffocating blanket over the entire property. She walked toward Tae-ho's private study, her steps heavy and uneven. She had used the last of her concealer to hide a fresh, swollen welt on her temple, the result of a frantic, botched attempt to meet Marcus at the service entrance that morning. He had been waiting in the shadows, his hand striking her before she could even speak, a reminder that her time was up. She had barely managed to scramble back inside before the security patrol circled back. Inside the study, Tae-ho was a statue of pure crystalline fury. He had spent his night watching the perimeter thermal feeds. He had seen a heat signature at the north gate. He had seen Nia's shadow move toward it, then retreat. To him, the evidence was final. She was a Choi informant. She was meeting her handler in the dead of night. The love he had tried to bury under layers of cruelty had turned into a toxic, burning charcoal in his gut. He was done. No more mean boss games, no more silent watching. Today, he would either break the truth out of her or he would erase her from his life forever. "Sit," he commanded before she even crossed the threshold. Nia sat. She didn't look at him. She couldn't. The swelling on her temple was throbbing, and every time she blinked, the world tilted. "Look at me, Nia." She raised her head slowly. The movement caused her collar to shift, revealing the edge of the fresh concealer that didn't quite match the grayish tint of her skin. Tae-ho's breath hitched. He saw the swelling. He saw the way she was squinting in the morning light. His heart screamed, "Who did this?" But his mind answered, "She's a traitor who got caught in the crossfire." He convinced himself she was injured during her spy mission at the gate. "I'm done playing the fool," Tae-ho said, his voice a low, terrifying vibration that rattled the pens on his desk. "I saw you at the gate this morning. I saw your friend. Is this what the Choi family pays you in, Nia? Bruises and midnight meetings?" "Sir, I told you, I have nothing to do with the Choi's." "Liar!" He slammed his fist onto the mahogany, the sound echoing like a gunshot. He stood up, his massive frame blotting out the sun. "You choose him every time. Every late night I keep you here to save you. You spend it crying for him. Every resource I put into your security, you use to find a way back to his arms. If you love him that much, if you're that loyal to the trash in that SUV, then tell me now." He walked around the desk, his movements predatory and absolute. He stopped inches from her, his scent of cedar and expensive whiskey, the remains of his long night, filling her senses. "Choose," he hissed, leaning down until their foreheads almost touched. "Tell me you love him. Tell me you're his spy, and I'll let you walk out that door right now. I'll fire you, and I'll never look at your face again. Or tell me the truth. Tell me why you're doing this to me." "I'm not doing anything to you," Nia sobbed, the desperation finally breaking her. "I'm just trying to survive." "Survival looks different in my world," Tae-ho roared. He grabbed her wrist, pinning it to the desk with a grip of iron. He was blinded by a jealous fever, a man who had lost his grip on reality. He wanted to shake her. He wanted to demand her heart. "Who is he, Nia? Why is he more important than me? What does he give you that I can't?" He hauled her up, his other hand grabbing the lapel of her blazer, intending to shake her into a confession. He was rough. He was fueled by 3 years of unspoken obsession and 3 days of lethal suspicion. "Show me," he demanded, jerking her forward. "Show me what you're hiding." He pulled at her blazer, his strength fueled by a possessive rage that had reached its boiling point. He meant to scare her. He meant to demand her loyalty. But as the fabric gave way, sliding up over her shoulder and pulling the thin silk of her blouse with it, the air in the room died. The harsh morning light hit the jagged, angry welts across her ribs. It hit the silver, rope-like scars on her back. It hit the map of agony that no amount of concealer could ever truly hide. Tae-ho's grip didn't just loosen, it went dead. The rage in his dark eyes flickered out, replaced by a haunting, hollow realization that hit him like a physical blow to the heart. The other man wasn't a lover, he wasn't a spy. The man Tae-ho was jealous of was a butcher. The silence that followed was absolute. For the first time in his life, the devil of Seoul looked like he was the one in pain. "Nia," he whispered, his voice a broken, jagged thing. "Who did this?" This was the intersection. The moment the lie ended and the war began, Tae-ho's hands, the same hands that had just pinned Nia with a jealous fury, now hovered in the air, trembling. He stared at the jagged silver scars carved into her skin, permanent receipts of a pain he had dismissed as theatrics. Every mean remark he had made, every late night he had forced her to work while she was already breaking, came rushing back like a tidal wave of acid. "Nia." His voice was a ghost of a sound, stripped of all its corporate steel. She didn't look up. She couldn't. She stood there with her blazer torn, her secret bared to the light, waiting for the final blow, but it never came. Instead, she felt a heat she hadn't expected. Tae-ho stepped into her space, his movements no longer predatory, but shattered. "I've been a monster," he rasped, the words catching in his throat. He didn't offer a soft apology. His pride was too broken for that. Instead, he gave her the raw, jagged truth. "I kept you late because I was terrified of the world you went home to. I was jealous of a ghost. I thought I was protecting my empire, but I was just another man hurting you. I wanted you so much I became the thing I hated." He reached out, his fingers barely grazing the edge of a scar on her shoulder. "I saw him, Nia. I saw him at the gate. I thought he was a spy. I didn't know he was the devil." His eyes shifted. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by a cold, white-hot vacuum of lethality. The boss was gone. The Mafia king had arrived. "June," Tae-ho said into his collar, his voice dropping to a frequency that signaled death. "The man at the north gate, the black SUV, don't kill him, not yet. I want him in the basement of the warehouse. Now!" Nia finally looked up, her eyes wide with terror. "Tae-ho, no, you can't. He'll tell the Chois, "The Chois are irrelevant," Tae-ho interrupted, his gaze locking onto hers with a possessive intensity that made her breath catch. "There is no Choi family, there is no Marcus, there is only me, and I am done sharing my air with him." 40 minutes later, the rain was screaming against the corrugated metal roof of a private warehouse on the edge of the estate. Inside, Marcus was zip-tied to a chair, his face a mess of blood and arrogance. He still thought he had a play. He still thought Nia was his leverage. "You think you can touch me, Kwon?" Marcus spat, a tooth flying from his mouth. "The Chois know I'm here. You touch me and Nia's life is over." Tae-ho walked out of the shadows. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket anymore. His white silk shirt was unbuttoned, his sleeves rolled up, and his black leather gloves were slick with the rain. He didn't look like a businessman. He looked like an apex predator who had found his prey. "Nia's life began the moment I saw those scars," Tae-ho said, his voice as calm as a frozen lake. "And yours? Yours ended the second you thought you could mark what belongs to me." Tae-ho didn't use a gun. A gun was too quick. A gun was for soldiers. This was personal. This was an erasure. He moved with a clinical, terrifying grace, his blows landing with the weight of an empire's fury. He didn't ask questions. He didn't want intel. He wanted Marcus to understand that in the hierarchy of monsters, he had just challenged the one at the very top. By the time Tae-ho walked out of the warehouse, he was wiping a single drop of blood from his cheek. He didn't look back. Behind him, the cleaners, were already moving in with the acid and the lime. Marcus Mitchell wouldn't just be dead, he would be a ghost that never existed. The sun was setting by the time Tae-ho returned to the main house. He found Nia in the library, wrapped in a thick cashmere blanket, staring at the fireplace. She looked small, but for the first time in years, the hypervigilance in her shoulders was gone. Tae-ho sat on the edge of the hearth, his presence a warm, solid weight. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He knew he hadn't earned it. "He's gone, Nia," he said quietly. She looked at him, searching his eyes for the tyrant she had feared. He was still there, but the cage was open. "What happens now?" Tae-ho reached out, taking her hand in his. His grip was firm, a silent vow of protection that transcended any contract. "Now you live," he said, his voice a low, possessive rumble. "You're moving into my penthouse in the city. No more subways, no more hiding. From today, my shadow is the only one allowed to touch you. If the Choi's want a war, I'll give them a massacre. But you never have to flinch again." Nia leaned her head against his shoulder, the scent of cedar and rain-washed silk filling her senses. She was still damaged, still healing from wounds that went deeper than the skin. But as she watched the firelight dance in Tae-ho's dark, obsessive eyes, she realized the truth. The golden cage hadn't disappeared. It had simply grown large enough to protect her from the world. And for the first time in her life, Nia wasn't afraid to be a prisoner of the king. The ex is gone. The war with the Choi has only just begun. But for Nia, the loudest sound in the world isn't the city below. It's the steady, possessive heartbeat of the man who finally gave her a reason to stop running. Tell me, should she trust a man who uses violence to show his love? I'll be in the comments reading your theories. Don't forget to hit the notification bell. The next chapter of this empire is coming sooner than you think, and you won't want to be on the outside looking in when the shadows move again.